I use a metaphor of going to a conversation with a closed fist. So you feel really strongly about something. Our ego wants us to be right because our identities are attached to our position. And so we enter with a fist. And then in the book, I'd introduce these four archetypal questions that say, how do we open our hand? So don't give up your position, but rather than hammer it, open your hand and tell the other why you thinking how you're thinking. Because in every opinion we have, in every judgment, there's four fundamental pieces. There, what do we want to have happen, our desires, our goals. There's our concerns we have about the future. Third is authority issues, power issues. And then the last one is standards. Every judgment we have is based on standards we hold of what's right and wrong, what's good and bad. However, those standards, pretty much 90%, we did not consciously choose because we adopted them from our families.
Welcome to Linda's Corner, where we bring more hope, healing, and happiness to the world. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about the art of conscious conversations. I'm delighted to welcome Chuck Wisner. Chuck is a thinker, coach, and a teacher in organizational strategy, human dynamics, and leadership excellence. Chuck is currently working as an advisor with leaders at the teams of Google, Rivian, Apple, and Tesla. His client list has included Harvard Business School, the Detroit Mayor's Office, General Motors, Shell, and Chrysler Motor Company. You can reach Chuck at his website, chuckwisner.com, and I'll include that link in the show notes. Welcome, Chuck. I'm so glad that you could join with me today.
Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. And I'm looking forward to this conversation and some important clarifications. We use words to speak. We have a conversation. And a lot of times what we think we are communicating isn't being received. And so I appreciate that you're here to help us to be able to increase our skill set so that we can be able to have a conscious conversation. And I really liked that word because the opposite would be an unconscious conversation. So
Right.
Can we kind of talk about the distinction of how we fall into one or other of those categories?
Yes. Well, we grow up learning how to talk to people and interact and have conversations through our families and our cultures. And we adopt the patterns, we adopt the ways that we are of our region, of our culture. And most of those patterns we have in conversation are habitual and we didn't choose them. So I sort of, after working with people for many, many years, and they would say, well, I don't know how all these pieces fit together. I wrote the book because I wanted to actually lay out how conversations work, why they work, and why they don't often work. So it's sort of a practical map to help people navigate everyday conversations at work and home.
You used a word that just sent my mind being around conversations that work. So when you say a conversation that works, what does that look like? What does that feel like? What happens when we have had a conversation that works?
Yeah. So without maybe realizing, we all have them. We walk away satisfied or happy or a problem resolved. Um, there's easy ways that it works. However, most of the time, not most of the time, but many, many times, we come into a conversation and there's diverse opinions, there's different beliefs. And when we don't know how to navigate those differences, that's when conversations don't work well because we go off on a reactive tangent or we get triggered, so we have an emotional reaction. So the work is when they're easy and we're satisfied. When they don't work is when we get triggered or we can't navigate a complicated differences.
And end up probably feeling frustrated and
Totally.
escalate whatever the situation was. So if you and I have come together to resolve an issue, we have different opinions about something, and we'd like to try to come up with some sort of consensus that we can both agree on. Something that worked would be, okay, I see what you're saying. I am agreeing with this part. I'm not liking this part. How can we come up with a solution? So
Mm-hmm.
this is huge. And I just see so great of a need for this because we do come in with our preconceived notions. I'm thinking of
Yeah.
politics. I'm thinking of so many different things where we have our different opinions and we kind of lock them in stone. And then
Mhm.
basically we just take our stones and we bang them together and we consider that a conversation. And I mean, it might make fire, but it doesn't make a conversation that works.
Right, right. I love your analogy. I use a metaphor of going to a conversation with a closed fist. So you feel really strongly about something. Our ego wants us to be right. Our ego sort of runs the show when we're really locked into a position because our identities are attached to our position. And so we enter with a fist. And then in the book, I'd introduce these four archetypal questions that say, how do we open our hand? So don't give up your position, but rather than hammer it, open your hand and tell the other, what are the elements? Why are you thinking how you're thinking? Because in every opinion we have, in every judgment, there's four fundamental pieces. There, what do we want to have happen? Our desires, our goals. They are concerns we have about the future. If we do this, if we don't take step A, we won't meet our budget, or the kids will be upset. Third is authority issues, power issues. Every conversation, whether it's at home or at work, there's always power issues. Even with friends, there's power issues because different friends, we give their voices different authority. And then the last one is standards. Every judgment we have is based on standards we hold of what's right and wrong, what's good and bad, what's productive, unproductive, what's pretty and what's ugly. However, those standards pretty much 90% we did not consciously choose because we adopted them from our families. And just a small example, I was told by my grandfather, my redneck grandfather, that I was not a big enough man because his standard was a man doesn't cry. A man really wants to go hunting and kill a deer. I didn't want to do any of those things. And so I kept getting the message. I grew up with that story in my head that I wasn't a big enough man until I was able to say, wait a minute, that was his standard. And now that I'm a grown man, I know I have a different standard. And I was able to bust that story inside my head.
Wow, that's huge. Now you have just elevated this beyond even communicating back and forth to what
Mm,
this is doing inside my head, the
yes.
messages that I have going on inside my head. So, those four things, that is beautiful. But I
Mm,
imagine that when we're having a conversation, when anyone's having a conversation, they're not consciously thinking of any of those things. We
right.
bring that with us, and then it becomes part of our conversation, our message, our very being. Can you help us to be able to open that fist? I loved that analogy.
Yeah. So one of the reasons it's difficult is our ego is fog and awareness is the light switch. So we need to become more aware of the stories we tell ourselves. We have stories about ourselves and we have stories about other people. And one exercise that I think is really productive, and I've done it with hundreds of people, is to write down on a piece of paper, divide it in half. Um, and this is an exercise that was created by Chris Argyris at Harvard Business School 30 years ago, ahead of his time. Um, but on the right side of the paper, you write what was exact words were said. I said it's too soon to say. I said, what do you think of the project? She says it's too soon to tell. I say, well, we're running out of time. She says, we're going to be okay. And I say, well, maybe we should talk to the boss. So that was how it was said. Now you go to the left hand side and you will write what you were thinking and feeling and no editorializing. So when I said, what do you think about the project, how the project's going? What I was thinking was, we are really in deep trouble. We're running out of budget and we're running out of time. And she says, it's too soon to tell. And what I was thinking while she said that was, she doesn't have a damn clue about what's going on. And then I say, well, maybe we need to talk to the boss. And she says, and I'm thinking, boy, if I don't talk to the boss, I'm gonna be in trouble in 2 weeks. So that's just a small example. It was a perfectly normal, seemingly normal conversation, but then all of this noise and chatter in our minds is in the background.
And is that what you call the private conversations?
That's the private conversations. Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So
yeah.
the part we say out loud to each other is one conversation, and we're having a whole second conversation related, probably, but also way blown out of proportion often that's going on in my mind. I'm trying to use my filter.
Yes, yes, but it's just surprisingly doing this exercise with so many people. It's amazing how many people, when they write it down, have a new awareness of how powerful it is. Because it's running and we're used to it. We don't really pay attention. It agitates us. It gives us emotional reactions. So it causes trouble, but we're not really paying attention. When the act of writing it down, they go, oh my God, it was full of negativity and swear words and judgments. Am I really that mean of a person? And so, the only way, the reason this exercise is really helpful is not to scare people into to discovering their private conversation, but to help them to realize that, well, you can't say it out loud because that would be a career limiting move or it would destroy a relationship. You can't hold it in because that's too painful and stressful and not good for our health, mental well being, physical well being. But we can process it. And then those four questions I talked about earlier, desires, concerns, authority, and standards. Those are the those are the recipe to deconstruct your judgments. First, you say, oh, what are the facts? Am I upset because I'm denying reality, or can we agree that the facts are this is what happened? And that's really important, especially given these days in politics where facts are getting a bad name. Um, so, but you ground yourself in facts, and then you ask yourself, what are my concerns? What do I want to have happen in this conversation? What standards am I judging this person by? And when you do that, you will find in those negative comments some golden nuggets that are perfectly acceptable to bring into the conversation. So instead of going like this and fist fighting, we open our hand and go, let me tell you my thinking. Here's my concerns. Do you have different concerns? Here's what I want to accomplish in this project. Are we on the same page? Do you have different goals? And here are my standards by judging whether this is whether we're doing well or not. Do you have different standards? So, see, it goes both ways. I can use it on myself to deconstruct my private, and I can use it with you to ask you good questions to help you open your fist.
Wow. Okay, that's huge. And you just made what to me was an important clarification. One, we were talking about kind of analyzing the conversation afterward, which is
Mhm.
beneficial for me. But when you come in with those four questions,
Questions.
and then bring it in, okay, before I have this conversation, I'm going to think about, okay, what is it that I want? And then bring that and be able to articulate in an intelligent way so that we can, like you said, open the fist.
Yeah, and we can dance we might still disagree, but we can dance around. Not We're not in it disagreeing, just this is pushing our position. We're deconstructing. So, oh wow, and then I might go, wow, I never thought of it that way. I'm thinking of it like this, and you just made me think of it a different way. Then you and I are in this very powerful mutual learning conversation. And that's where creativity then bubbles in, because then in that open space, that open heart, ideas just come up, you know, and together we might come up with an idea that neither of us would have thought on our own.
That is so amazing. I'm thinking of it in terms of a business meeting. How would this
Hmm.
be applied in like a relationship? Say you're dealing with your ex and you're trying to have a conversation about, custody or who gets to pick up the kids after school or something. Can you kind of help
Hmm.
us walk through how I would use it there?
Well, those the business situation and the home situation are different for one reason, because of the power issues, right? In business, we're in a hierarchy. And so if we are doing this with a boss, we have to be careful of our words because, when you push back on a boss, depending on their temperament and their style, there's risk involved, right? But still, to deconstruct your thinking and share it with your boss for the purpose of coming up with a better solution, you're doing the boss a favor. If you don't share your thinking, you might know something that they don't know, and you're doing them a disservice. Now, in family situations like child custody, or just not even child custody, but just like who's going to pick the kids up, um, this comes down to there's multiple things. There's desires, and I imagine in some ways both the husband and wife have a desire to want the child to be picked up at the right time, at the right place, right? So they can agree on that. Um, One might have a concern like, I can't pick them up because I have a board meeting. It's not over till 4. It always runs late, and I can't get to school on time. I apologize. I will do it next week. I can't do it now. So he puts his concerns on the table. Now the other person gets to go, well, that's cool, or that's okay, I get it. Or they could fight you back, right? But at least we're in a conversation that they know what my concerns are. And they might say, well, I'm stuck because I have a flat tire. So now we have to put our heads together and go, okay, how do we solve this problem? And I might go, you know what, my brother's in town. I'm going to ask him to go pick him up, right? Yeah, and that's just one way of you detangle this stuff, and then it opens the conversation up, and then we might find creative solutions.
That is beautiful. And isn't it interesting these four things, the what I want, my desires, my concerns, and the
Hmm.
power issue and our standards of right and wrong, these are going to come into every conversation. But as you mentioned, we have a difference when we are in a business setting where there is a structured hierarchy. And I
Right.
know if I am speaking to my supervisor or my employee or my boss, whatever level it is, I know where I fit in relation to that other person. And it kind of frames my power, my authority as I present things, whether it's going to be, I guess, a suggestion or this is what we're doing or whatever.
Hmm.
And yet, when we're talking about relationships, when we are on equal ground, then we don't have that hierarchy. I think we would all like to be the person on the higher ground, and we just like everyone else to do what we say. And they are
Yeah.
thinking, I don't want to do what you say. And I don't want to
Yes.
do it because you said it. And so
Yeah.
it can become, I can just feel how this can easily become a power struggle or
Right.
a
Right.
perceived power struggle.
That's right. That's right. And that's when those happen, our fists tighten up, because then our ego is saying, you better defend yourself, right? And so the ego is really the fog. And like I said, awareness, well, here's my concerns, here's my standards. Standards also play a place at home because one person or the other, the woman or the man, might be the breadwinner, right? And have less time to be flexible. And couples can accept that standard, but some couples can't accept that standard. And so they're always fighting, when in reality, there's often not much to be done. So, in a sense, if we can't accept that standard, we're fighting reality. Did that make sense? I made a little circle there.
We're fighting reality. I'm
Yeah.
still thinking about the ego and about how
Mm.
that is everything. I need to defend myself. I need to defend my position, and how that creates problems. And do we really need to defend ourselves, or is that us feeling weak and like we need to create a shield or a perceived sense of power?
Yeah. I like to think of the ways that we get defended, ways we defend ourselves or get defensive. I think of these things as conversational patterns, rather than habits. Because when I look at a pattern I have that maybe I didn't do something as well as I'd like, and I've been studying this stuff for 30 years, so, and I still practice, right? But when I think of something that I didn't do as well as I'd like, I say, oh, wow, that's a really interesting pattern because I recognize that the pattern I have, I did not consciously choose. Example, when my kids were young, they're grown men now, um, and they would misbehave and get too loud or too rambunctious, and my wife would get upset. I would go ballistic. I would lose it. I would get angry. I would scream. I wouldn't hit them, but I would go ballistic. What I recognized was, well, first of all, I saw that, well, after that happened multiple times and everybody's in tears, and I'm like saying, what the hell just happened? Right? Realize, well, wait a minute, this isn't good. This isn't a good way to do this. That's not the dad I want to be. Uh, and when I did the investigation, what I found out was that is what my father did. So I adopted my father's pattern unconsciously. That was the model. How I knew how to do by watching him. But I could look at that and go, well, it's a pattern I got from it. I do not have to have that. I can have a different standard about how to behave, how to respond to my kids misbehaving. So that's how I was able to make the turn because I was able to look at it as a witness and go, wait a minute, that pattern, I don't have to keep that pattern. I can change it.
Okay, that was brilliant on so many levels. I love by putting it as a pattern, and you talked about looking at as a almost a witness, like, wow, I'm going to step
Mhm.
back and I'm going to notice this thing. All of a sudden, it's not necessarily personal. So if we had gone at it
Right,
another way and said, why do I always lose my temper? What is wrong with me? Why am I such a horrible father? Why am I da 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 da? And it wasn't why am I, as in who I am. It was
right.
I am using this pattern.
Yeah,
I'm noticing this pattern. Okay, I'm going to take this pattern off and I'm going to take it away from myself and just look at it for a minute.
right,
Where is that familiar? Why is that familiar? Where did I see that before? And then be able to recognize, hey, that was my father. I
that's right. Right,
learned that from his example. And then all of a sudden, you are empowered to make another choice. But it
right.
required that awareness first. Oh, that was beautiful.
That's that's right.
Separating
You,
yourself as the pattern. I mean, taking it
yep,
as a pattern and not making it personal,
right.
becoming aware, and then you can make that choice. Oh, that was golden nuggets shining brightly.
Yeah, yeah, and that's that. What it is, it's like this incredible freedom because instead of judging ourselves and we spiral down like I'm such an idiot, I shouldn't do that. I'm never going to do it again, and then we do it again. I'm never going to do it again, and then we do it again. We're spiraling down and we're judging ourselves. When we do this witnessing, we look out. Okay, that's just a pattern. That's not me, right? We're diminishing the ego first of all, and
That's yes.
we're increasing our awareness by witnessing, right? And then I'm free. I go, oh gosh, I'm not a slave to the pattern.
That was huge. It was brilliant. That was a way to kind of save and protect the ego at that very first step where it wasn't about you, it was about the pattern. And then
Right,
it's safe to look at.
right,
Ooh, man, that was amazing.
yeah. And that's and the other thing is it creates space in our thinking. It creates space so that we're not locked into the pattern. The space goes, okay, what else is possible? What could I do in this situation that would be different and better for me and better for the kids?
Wow. Okay.
Mm,
And
mm.
you've been doing this for 30 years. And I actually really appreciate that you shared a story of you not being perfect because that shows, we don't have to start being perfect and knowing how to do everything automatically. It's, oh, this is a learned skill set, which means
Mm,
I have the power to be able to apply this and to be able to use it. And I think that matters. Um, so that
Yes.
there's that openness of, okay, I can do this. This is something that's available for me.
That realization, then it takes a bit of courage, and it takes a bit of humility, Uh, and honestly, it is a lifelong practice. If you think about it, we if you're 30 years old, if you're 20 years old, if you're 50 years old, we have these patterns that are ingrained in our neurons, right? So when we start a practice of saying, let me investigate my pattern, let me investigate my triggers, let me investigate why I get upset when the boss treats me this way. When we start looking at them as a witness, right? We're messing around with our neurons. So it takes a little time. You got to practice. You practice like if you're learning to play the piano or learning to play golf or whatever the hell it is, and it takes a little time. But I can guarantee you that over time it gets better and better and lighter, and life becomes less stressful.
Oh, hooray. And that gives us a little bit of grace that it's okay if we don't do it perfectly right away. Now that you have applied this and you apply it in business, what kind of improvements have you seen? Can you give us some examples of people saying, oh, I got this, and now things
Mm.
are working better?
Well, with clients, I mean, yeah, yeah. One is, let's call him Josh. Was a senior executive, senior VP at a very large company, and he had a team of about 10 direct reports, and he was having trouble with his team, and there were complaints about him and blah, blah. So I got called in to sort of see what was going on, and I knew Josh. So he asked me to come, and so I watched him and his team in action. I just was a interloper. Um, and assessing what was going on. And it turns out that Josh was incredibly passionate about his job and about the future. It was a sort of a new division of the company about the future, what was going to happen. So he would come to these meetings. He was all fired up saying, and we have this opportunity, we have this opportunity, and here's what we can do, and here's what we can do. And he'd be on a flip chart or a whiteboard drawing, right? And then he would stop and he would look at his team and say, what do you guys think? There would be crickets. Crickets. Because they were like, what are we going to say? You have it all figured out, you know? So anyway, I did a quick assessment. I worked with Josh, and he actually realized that his passion and putting his answers out front played right into the culture of the company, which is like a strong hierarchy, right? So if the boss says this is what we're going to do, and he feels really passionate about it, I'm not going to raise my hand and go, "Hey, sorry, Josh, I think you're wrong," right? So he had to totally shift his style and say, "Look, I care about this project. I don't have all the answers. I need to hear your perspectives, and then let's dialogue about all the perspectives, including mine, that are in the room." He totally changed his style, and his team became much more engaged.
That is brilliant. You helped him learn how to create a safe space where people
Right.
felt like their input was heard and valued.
And
Because,
crucial.
yes. And if
Yeah.
not that, then everything is turned off. And we
Right.
just, like you said, I mean, if the conclusion of this meeting is going to be that I'm supposed to do what you say, well, let's just get started then.
Yeah. Let's get on with it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, if that's the answer, but if you actually want my input, if you actually want something, if I am a valued, crucial member of the team and you want to hear what I have to say, I do have something to say, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to put it out there just to have it rejected or mocked,
Or
whatever.
right. Or a ding on my review when when I have it in 2 months. Yeah. Yeah. So the
Exactly.
psychological safety, that's what he did. Yeah.
Oh, that was brilliant. Oh, thank you
Mhm.
so much.
Yeah.
This is so important in every aspect of our life, in our work, in our home, in our community, everywhere.
Yep.
So, um, thank you for
Hmm.
learning and for organizing your thoughts in a way that you can share them so that we can learn too.
Hmm.
Is there anything else you want to make sure that we cover before we close today?
No, if people are intrigued, try to pick up my book because we're just touching on the elements in the book. I'd say the good advice is practice witnessing your patterns, like track them like a wild animal, just like without judgment. Go, wow, I get triggered when this happens, or I get triggered when that happens. just track those without judgment, because then you can start to say, do I want to change that pattern or not change that pattern? And for ourselves and for other people, I think learning to be better at questions versus answers is really an incredible step also, because we are trained to be advocates. We're trained to have the answer, and to question our own answers and to ask questions of other people to help them open their thinking is a very powerful part of our interactions. Yeah.
Okay, there's another golden nugget. I would like to expand on that for a minute. Be better at questions than answers. I know for
Mm.
some people listening, they're probably thinking, but just coming up with the answer is so much more efficient. Why
Yeah.
would I want to come up with a question? How is a question going to help me?
Yeah. Well, we have an addiction in the book. There's four conversations: storytelling, collaboration, creative, and decision making, or commitments. We have an addiction to our stories. Our ego loves our stories. And our stories can serve us, but they can also harm us. But when we get into a meeting or with our family, we have a story and we enter like this, right? We have a story. We love action. We love to make, okay, who's going to do what by when, right? The middle two conversations, which are how we collaborate and learn from each other, mutual learning, and wonder about possibilities, wonder about what else is possible, those two get skipped over. I call that a conversational bypass, because we go from stories, we hear stories in a meeting, and then someone says, okay, what are we going to do? And that whole juicy collaborating, what do you think? What do I think? Where do we disagree? What can we agree on? And then what's possible instead of the right answer, what's other answers? We skip those. And that's a conversational bypass. And so the questions are, help me understand why you're thinking that way. We disagree, but help me understand your standard, or help me understand why you're concerned. Those are the questions that open up the other person's hand, right? We are trained to be advocates. We're trained to be bad advocates. I mean, we raise our hand in school because we have the answer and we get the gold star. And we're trained in business to have the answer. And the smarter we are, the more we get promoted, and then we are expected to have the answers. It's okay to have answers. Expertise is great, but we have to counterbalance that with questions, a curiosity to really understand other people's perspectives.
That was beautiful. And it was through the question, and I loved how you put it. It was non-threatening.
Right.
What is your concern? What
Right.
is your standard here? What is it that you're help me to understand?
Help. That's right. Help me understand your position, how you're thinking. Right.
And that helps their ego to not be set off and panicking so that we can continue to the next step. So if we started with that fist analogy, if I come
Hmm.
ready to extend
Open.
a hand, then it
Hmm.
will help the other person I'm speaking with to be able to open a hand because it will be
Absolutely.
safe for them as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. There's a little contagion in there. It's like if I show humility and vulnerability, it invites other people to let down their guard a bit.
And that's so scary because we want to protect ourselves. We don't know how someone else is going to respond. But that
Right.
little bit of help me to understand where you're coming from, that's very important.
One little tidbit to add on to that. You are going to run into people that will not play fair, that will not open their fist. Don't fight
Oh,
that. Just let them have their fist and disengage. And that's a perfectly okay example, because you might need to disengage to recenter yourself, to get more information, to get someone to support you, whatever it is. But don't, if you hit a really hard fist, don't beat yourself up if you can't get them to open their hand, because that's their problem. Let them do it, and then go figure out what your next possible move is.
okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if I'm in a situation where I'm starting to try to extend a hand and I'm receiving a fist, this is a time to disengage and to be
Hmm.
able to maybe regroup and maybe find
Hmm.
another way, and maybe even another person to communicate with, or another way to
Right.
get the things that I need.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that you included that, because that happens and we
Yep.
don't always get the response that we want. And so I think it's good to be prepared. And I imagine you talk about that in your book as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a way of, taking care of yourself. We all have to take care of ourselves. If someone's a fist and it feels threatening to you, just remove yourself. You don't have to you just say, you know what, I don't. This conversation isn't really landing for me, so I'm going to remove myself, and maybe we can reconnect later. Something simple, doesn't have to be mean spirited.
Yes, that was beautiful. That was
Mm,
the way that you said that. You were in control, you were calm, and very decisive. It's like, I am going to
mm,
remove myself. This is the next step, and we'll try
right,
again later or whatever.
right.
Thank you. I appreciate you visiting with me today and sharing this. It's so important.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm enjoying letting people know about the work and the book, so it's great.
That is fantastic. In closing, I'd like to share a quote by Viktor Frankl. He said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." Today, I invite our listeners to use our power to choose our response to improve our conversations and the quality of our lives. See you next time on Linda's Corner. Thanks for tuning in to Linda's Corner podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends to help us inspire even more listeners. Be sure to visit hopeforhealingfoundation.org for free and affordable resources to help you overcome life's challenges. And explore healingbreathworkdetox.com, where you'll find transformative tools for deep inner healing and lasting change. Also, don't forget to check out my books, Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, and You Got This, an action plan to calm fear, anxiety, worry, and stress. Your journey to hope, healing, and happiness starts here.